Hey, it's David Bradshaw. I just wanted to reach out to you and thank you for all of you that have signed up and are engaging in this family across the nation with Awaken the Dawn. And we are so excited about everything the Lord is doing. And you know, Awaken the Dawn is not a centralized organization, but it's really a family across the nation that's carrying a heart for God and engaging around some key values. And today I wanted to come and share with you our 7 key values that define what Awaken the Dawn represents, why it exists, where it's going. These 7 things really define this family and this movement, not in a top-down organizational sense, but in a heart, value, and engagement and relationship. So that's our heart, and our desire for you is that we could communicate and track together around these 7 values. This is the why behind a what. These values inform everything we're making, whether it's decisions here in our office in Virginia, or whether it's just how we're going to gather, what language we're going to use, as we move forward as a family, as a decentralized, organic, grassroots family that's dreaming of hosting the presence of God in the center of our cities as a rescue mission, a bold, audacious rescue mission to a generation in America. We are convinced that out of this family, souls are going to be saved and Jesus' worth is going to be put on display for real across America. We're really touching the beginnings, the rumblings of an authentic Jesus movement. That's for real. That's in our hearts. So defining these values becomes all the more important because it's a rescue mission to a generation, and it's a tabernacle of David hosting the presence of God in public phenomenon. And the tents become like a silver bullet that's facilitating all of that. But underneath of it are values that are defining thoughts and values. So here are the 7 values. Each one of these could be a teaching. So I'm not going to do a teaching around each one of these 7 values. What I'm going to do today is just introduce you to the 7 values that define all of our decision making and all of our heart and our thought process for Awaken the Dawn. So number 1, first value is this: the worth of Jesus. It's the person of Jesus himself that is our focus, our desire, and the primary thing that's governing all that we do is that Jesus' person, his worth, would be put on display in our cities and in our nation. I often think about John chapter 3, where John the Baptist comes onto the scene in Israel, and people are flocking to him because he has something. He is carrying God's heart and his voice and his word. And it literally says that all of Israel was going all the way out into the desert to see John the Baptist because of what he was carrying. And it was incredibly powerful. In fact, there's not even a testimony that he's doing any miracles. It just has him out in the desert communicating. But his communication, his preaching was so powerful, people would gather the family, pack a lunch, and walk miles out in the middle of the desert to hear him. But there was this moment where more people started going to Jesus than John the Baptist. And in John 3, the guys go to him and they go, "John, what's the deal? I mean, they used to come to you, now they're going to Jesus." And he says this phrase that many of you know really well in the context of that. And he goes, "The one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. Therefore, this joy of mine is now complete. He must increase, I must decrease." So the point of ATD is not to build our brand. The point is to build Jesus' brand. And ATD as a brand only works in so much as it's building Jesus' brand. Like for real. Like people's hearts are awakening with the love of God. So this is the first value. Jesus' worth, it needs to go viral. The primary message is the beauty of what Jesus is like in his person. The cross, the resurrection, his ascension, all that he is, which is why Christology is so important to everything that we do. So we want all of those that are setting up tents across America, if you're part of Tent America or whatever, to resonate deeply with not building our brand, but truly building Jesus' brand as a friend of the bridegroom, the same spirit of John the Baptist. He must increase, we must decrease, and this is the overriding passion of the ATD movement. Jesus is actually beautiful. He's stunning and shocking in his beauty. The second value is this. It is music. It's a musical movement. It doesn't mean that everyone in the movement is a musician, obviously, but it means that we, like David of old, who hired 4,288 guys, he paid their salaries, he invested about $200 billion of his own finance, King David, in building a musical worshiping movement in Israel, and much of it wasn't prescribed in the actual law at the time. He was operating in this overflow of his heart. So this is our second value together, is that we recognize what happens when singers and musicians, when creative people are called into their place in our cities and are given a context to express their adoration to God, express their songwriting, day and night worship. This is a massive value to us. So the first value is the worth of Jesus. The second value is we are a musical movement. Not everyone's a musician, but we are deliberately calling out musicians. When we were on the National Mall in 2017, we had 1,600 worship teams that came together. And it was that offering of love to God that changed the atmosphere of Washington, D.C. It produced a drop in the crime rate to the point that the Capitol Police are talking to us about the fact that the crime has dropped and it's a buzz in the city. We saw top government officials giving their life to Christ. Well, unceasing adoration in the context of musicians and singers was the key to that taking place in the city. So God has a unique role biblically for singers and musicians. Isaiah 42 is a great passage, just referencing it for you. It says in Isaiah 42 that the whole world is going to be covered with a song before Jesus comes back. Isaiah 24 says the same thing. So this isn't like a fringe thing, but this is actually from Genesis to Revelation a piece, a significant piece of Jesus' blueprint for the nations of the earth is singers and musicians functioning before him, writing songs in a place, in a heart posture of adoration, of worship. It changes the atmosphere of cities. So music is the second value. The third value is family. So we recognize, John 17:21, Jesus prayed that we would be one as he and the Father are one. So we have a high value on relationship as a greater priority than organization. And so we're discovering one another in this. We're valuing people. We are asking God to help us to have eyes for the people. We see people. We don't see them as just a pawn that comes and builds an organization, but we see them as the beloved of God that they actually are, and we treat them with dignity, with honor, different denominations, different streams and tribes, as we've said in the past. We want to honor them, give them a place at the table. It's almost like any good mom or any good family having a Thanksgiving dinner. You don't throw the party, you don't throw the feast until everyone's at the table. There's a sense of honor and there's a sense of God's presence and favor when we're together. And so this whole movement exists deliberately to build family across denominations and ethnicities and genders and backgrounds. We're saying, for real, God is building a family more than an organization, more than a 501c3. He's going, I want you to love one another. So we want to do tents and we want to do gatherings only in such a way as they're serving to build a family. So the worth of Jesus, number one, his beauty and splendor. Number two, music, songwriting, worship at the point of the Spirit. Number three, John 17:21. We want to just create an environment for us to find one another, to us to fall in love with one another in the midst of the worth of Jesus and the musical movement. The fourth value is this: Sermon on the Mount lifestyles. And again, every one of these is a teaching, but I had a dream recently where I was in a big conference and I was teaching on the Sermon on the Mount, and somebody walks up to me that's a famous conference speaker in the dream, and he says, man, he's like, you're teaching on the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, right in the middle of this event. And he goes, this is not a normal conference message, but he goes, this is the right thing. I felt that dream was a kiss from the Lord because we were already being stirred to simply say this: let us plumb line ourselves into Matthew 5 through 7, which is the Sermon on the Mount. There is a lifestyle that Jesus offers us. We're not earning something from God, but it's a lifestyle that he offers us. That's the truly beautiful life. And if we're not producing the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The poor in spirit possess nothing. They don't even possess their own life. The only thing they possess in the ultimate sense is God. And then you go on and on. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. It says that the meek, which is people that treat others with their best, the interest of others as their primary goal and how they're relating to them. That's what meekness looks like. So these are the examples of what the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, tells us. So we are inviting you as a community to embrace this value of the Sermon on the Mount. So we got the worth of Jesus as our core message. We got musicians and singers. We got the culture of family, John 17:21. Number 4, we have the Sermon on the Mount, lifestyle that we want to be significantly focused and engaged upon with our national movement. So that's value number 4. Value number 5 is this: prophetic storyline. The idea is that this whole movement with Awaken the Dawn, we went to the National Mall not because we had a really good idea. Honestly, it wasn't a boardroom. It was as we were seeking God in a community day and night, this move of God began to happen where, like Isaiah 30, it says he comes as a voice behind us saying, this is the way, walk in it. The best way to move and see long-term fruit is as we're doing God's will on the earth. And the greatest part about this is God has an incredible storyline. Jesus is writing the best storyline. And our job is really just to hear and say yes. And so as we're seeking God with music and worship as family, what happens in that environment is that God gives us divine storylines. So you have a storyline for your city, for your life, for your family, for ministry, and we just want to find those storylines and say yes to what God is doing. And that is what Awaken the Dawn has been, a divine storyline. God told us to go to the mall powerfully. We had multiple dreams that were the same word. We had people calling and telling us the same thing that God had shown us in a dream. We had moments where my wife and I went on a fast for a week and said, God, if you're telling us to go to the National Mall, we're asking you to confirm it. And then right in the middle of the fast, somebody emails with a dream where I'm standing in the dream and he walks up to me and he says, the Holy Spirit says, don't be afraid to do the new thing he's told you to do. That was right in our moment. And then I'm with Lou Engle, and many of you have heard this, but he says, your next step is to talk to this man, this friend of mine. I go to the airport, 30 minutes later, this guy is in front of me in line. He's from another city. These are things you could never make up. And the point is, these things are a bit dramatic, but all of us have a divine storyline, and we want to stay in Jesus' story. We want to keep saying yes to him. So that's the next value, is the storyline, this prophetic storyline. We value that as a family across America. And there's 2 final values. Number 6 is this value for contending prayer, day and night prayer. We are a prayer movement. And right at our core, we recognize that God's government comes when we cry out to him. It's in the conversation with God that he executes power, transformation in our cities and in our nation. So we have a high value, which again is why we do tents and why we have a prayer network and all of these things that are beginning to emerge around us, is because we recognize God has upside down, backwards ways, and he values prayer. Gathering in rooms or tents and talking to him is that boiler room that produces transformational missions, movements on the earth. So we are a prayer movement right at our core. No revival in history that's brought any change to cities, regions, nations, or campuses has been anything other than a prayer movement at its core. This is the testimony of thousands of years of history. We want to ride the wave. We want to see things that we can't produce by our own wisdom, and that comes as we're a prayer movement before the Lord. And then the last one is this. It's mission. And that is, we have an assignment. It's a rescue mission to a generation, and that's going to result in a missions movement to unreached peoples in the nations. So mission is that final value. We want a plumb line to the Great Commission. We're not here to build, again, a brand or a ministry or a sense of identity. We want to say, Jesus, you are burning with desire for the youth of America and the campuses of America to experience your glory, your reality, the gospel of Christ, touching lost people, and then plumb lined into this dream of Jesus. Again, it's his storyline, that unreached peoples all over the world would have a witness to the gospel. I dare to believe that out of this family across America, we're going to see laborers thrust into nations, and particularly in our nation, campuses begin to shake with the gospel, and cities begin to shake with the gospel, which is why we go in tents in public. One of the reasons is we want to be a witness in the most public environments on our campus. So these are our values. These values define everything that we are. Each one of them it could be mountains of teaching, which I'm not doing now. All I'm doing today is saying, I want to invite you to enter into a family that is burning with the worth of Jesus. He's beautiful. He's our desire. He's our message. He is the primary defining characteristic of this family. Number 2, music. Number 3, we have this family, this John 17:21 family that's more about relationships than it is about building an organization, and that crosses ethnic and denominational lines. Next, we have this reality of God building a prayer movement across the nation. We are a prayer movement at our core because that's how God's government works. That's what the elders in heaven are doing. They have bowls in their hands in Revelation 5 that have our prayers in it, and God executes his will on the earth that way. It changes whole cities. We're a Sermon on the Mount lifestyle. We so want to do the red letters. We don't want to just build an organization. We want to walk as disciples of Jesus and make disciples of Jesus. Then we are a missions movement, and we are launching into campuses, taking worship and prayer, not just in our prayer rooms, but out into public. We're going in tents, into campuses, and we're dreaming with God, seriously, for a Jesus movement. That means tens of thousands of people in the next few years in America, especially the youth of America, are coming into a revelation of Jesus and all that he is, and they're getting saved. And then that's going to produce, I really believe, a missions movement that touches unreached people. And so these values plumb line every decision that we make. These 7 values, they define us as a movement. And I know as you're watching, if you signed up for a tent, I'm guessing as I say these 7 values, you're like, that is 100% who I am. I want to see music, songwriting, creativity, media, day and night prayer as a culture of family together, plumb line to the Great Commission and producing the Sermon on the Mount lifestyle. And all of that is only because Jesus is really beautiful. He's the source of joy above every other thing. In his presence is fullness of joy. And honestly, we've got a group of people out there that are just wrecked, that are absolutely undone because of who he is, not impressed with ministry machines, not impressed with ourselves, but just really just impressed with him. So dive into these values with us as you're pursuing it. We invite you into this story together, and invite you to begin to teach and mine out these values. Jesus is coming back. He's the source. He's the epicenter. And we're anticipating not just his beauty being displayed, but that worth of Jesus means he's really going to come and show himself in every way. And eventually, he's going to stand on the earth, and we want to be part of it. So as wild as that sounds to the world, that's defining our decision making. And we want to invite you into this family together. And what we're going to do is release more teaching moments around these values, because there is a wealth here that could actually change our nation and the nation. So we love you guys. Thanks for being a part of this family. And let's step into the Jesus movement that's in front of us with faith, with boldness. But let's build it on the right foundation. Let's build the house on the rock. So love you guys. We'll be in touch with more content soon.